You may have heard the term resilience before, particularly in the context of child, adolescent, or maybe student resilience. Resilience is an increasingly popular concept because it emphasizes the capacities of children, youth, and adults to succeed when faced with challenges. Because resilience is such a popular concept, there are many different definitions of the term, and people may use the word resilience to mean different things. In today's Resource Parent Curriculum podcast, we are going to discuss resilience in foster youth. The goal of this podcast is to provide a brief overview of resilience and talk about some examples of how to promote resilience among foster youth, with suggestions for foster parents and also for adults who may work with foster youth. My name is Brian Houston, and I am the director of the Disaster and Community Crisis Center at the University of Missouri. We are part of the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Much of the work we do at our center is focused on youth, adults, and community resilience. In a moment, I'll be joined by Imani Myers, who works with foster youth in Washington, D.C., and we will share our thoughts about and examples of child and youth resilience. But first, what is resilience? As I mentioned before, there are lots of different definitions of resilience available in books, journal articles, and online. But, to put it simply, resilience is the ability to recover and become strong, healthy, and successful after difficult or bad things happen. So if resilience is the capacity to cope when faced with challenges, what are some things that can help build resilience in youth? Youth may be more resilient if they have supportive people in their lives, like friends, family members, teachers, coaches, or mentors. Youth may be more resilient if they have a positive outlook on life, or are optimistic or hopeful. Youth may be more resilient if they feel connected to others, other youth, adults, and members of the community. Youth who know and are able to use positive coping strategies may be more resilient when faced with challenges. Having hobbies or enjoying and engaging in activities like sports, music, arts, reading, and writing may help youth be more resilient. And finally, cultural and spiritual beliefs may provide meaning and guidance that can facilitate resilience in youth. Working from this general overview of youth resilience, today's Parent Resource Curriculum podcast is focused on resilience in foster youth. To discuss resilience in the foster care system, I'm joined by Amnoni Myers, who works with foster youth in Washington, D.C. Imani, thanks for being here today. And could you start by introducing yourself and describing the work that you currently do?
So my name is Imani Myers, and I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, but I currently live in D.C. I am working right now at an organization called Family Matters, where I am working as the Support Services and Youth Advocacy Coordinator. So working with teenagers 15 to 21 who are trying to transition out of care. And so my role is to help connect them to resources and to basically make their transition out of care as smooth as possible, because we know that a lot of young people who age out of the system age out pretty abruptly with little support or stability. And so DC right now is trying to make sure that that path is a little less unstable. And so my role within the organization is to help them get to that place. And so, but previously I worked more so on the policy side of things. So I had experience on Capitol Hill, where I was working on key child welfare policies and making key recommendations, as well as interning at the White House. But I thought that for me, it'd be more important to utilize what I've learned on the Hill and at the White House to be able to connect that on the ground, because in the future I would like to go back to policy, but what I really want to have is a on-the-ground experience where I'm working directly with the people so that I know how to affect policy on a broader level. And I think that would be much more of a powerful experience.
Yeah, great. And so this podcast, as you know, is about resilience.
Yes.
And resilience in the context of the foster care system and foster care youth and foster care parents. So when people say resilience, what does that mean to you, or what do you think of, or how do you think about resilience, or do you think about resilience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when I think about resilience, I think about the ability to be able to go through something that's challenging, but despite going through something challenging, you're able to overcome and you're able to still move forward despite that. And I remember when I was younger, actually when I was just about aging out, I had a mentor who said to me, Imani, you should never allow your past to dictate your future. And that was something I never really understood, because growing up in the foster care system, I was always told that my past would define me, or my experiences would define me. not more so in the positive sense, but the negative sense. And so when she was able to tell me that you don't have to allow your past to dictate your future, I looked at that as more of a positive route that I could take, but that I could utilize my past in a way to look at it, but to allow that to actually be a moving force for me to move forward. And so when I think about resilience, I really think about not allowing your past to dictate your future. Mm-hmm. The other thing I think about, I was talking with actually a woman today, and she was saying to me that in their workshops and things like that, the way that they define resilience, which is something that I can really speak to, is she said that resilience is knowing when you're falling and knowing how to catch yourself. Mm. And for me, that was so important because sometimes people, fall and don't know how to get back up. But then for those, there are people who can actually fall and catch themselves. Not to say that people who fall down and can't get back up, not to say that they aren't resilient, because I would say that resilience looks different for various people. But I think the ability to be able to catch yourself in the midst of everything is so key. Mm-hmm.
And so what do you think, for people for foster youth mm-hmm. that you've known or that you've worked with or in your experiences, for foster youth who are able to be resilient, who are able to sort of see when they fall and pick themselves up or get back up, what are the type of things that allow youth to be resilient in your experience?
In my experience, I would definitely say the supports that are around them. I think if you have supportive people around you that are not only connecting you to resources, but also instilling different values and instilling different truths inside of you, I think that makes all of the difference. I have some youth who've never heard that they were smart. But until you tell them that they're smart, they're able to really look at themselves and say, okay, if they say that I'm smart, I'm sure I am smart, and they can work out of that lens. Another thing that I've been able to see within some of my clients is the powerful tool of motivation, self-motivation. Even in some of the most challenging situations, the fact that the young person can still call me, even if their situation doesn't look like the way that they want it to be, the fact that they're still able to call me, despite what's going on around them, to say that they still want help, that to me is a sign of motivation, and that's also a sign of resilience. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there are different ways that a young person can reach resilience, but I would say having a supportive adult around them is something that is really, really key.
That's how I think about resilience in terms of supports as well, really as that part being crucial. I mean, you mentioned a youth being smart, you mentioned a youth being motivated, but as you also mentioned, having the supports of having someone say, oh, you are intelligent, you ought to give that a go, you've got talents in that area. It's the support mechanism that really activates these other things. Or when you talk about motivation, having someone to reach out to makes a big difference, right?
Yes.
We say people need to be motivated, but if they don't have any supports to reach out to or any connections to reach out to, then what good is motivation if you have no supports?
That's true, and I think the most important thing is that none of us have made it here alone. We've had someone or something that has helped motivate us or that has helped support us along the way. And I think for many of these foster youth, they don't have that. And so for me, I think within my job is not to just look at it as a job, but to really utilize my time well with them, because I know that I'm not going to be in their lives forever. But what is it? It's not necessarily about the quantity of time, but actually the quality of time that you are spending with them. And so for me, again, going back to that support is so key. Mm-hmm.
And so what would you tell a foster parent if a foster parent came to you and said, what can I do to make my foster child more resilient or to foster resilience in my foster children? What would you tell them?
I would say the first thing is it's so important to meet the child where they're at. I think oftentimes when a child enters in the home, foster parents have, as we all have expectations, and it's good to have expectations, but I think sometimes when your expectations exceed something that they may not be able to reach just yet, and you're pushing that onto them, I think sometimes that makes it much more difficult for them to actually reach resilience, because you want them to reach resilience based on your own terms and your own definition of what resilience looks like. And so I think if you meet a child where they're at with the goal and intention of resilience, that is key. But the true fact is that they are resilient because they're still here. And so I think having that and knowing that, I think is so crucial. I think the other important thing about resilience is helping the child to understand their own story and not necessarily defining their story for them. But what does it look like for them to have the power and the option to figure out who they are in the context of their own story? Because sometimes in these type of situations, the youth have not had the opportunity to figure out who they are, let alone they haven't been given the opportunity to say who they are, because they've been often told who they were and what their story is. And sometimes the child welfare system has defined that for them. And when you look at resilience and you look at, especially like trauma-informed care, the importance and the ability to allow the child to understand their own story in their own context, but you being a support with that. And coming in as a listener and a learner, not necessarily as a person who, again, is defining that for them. And so I think for me, what would have been really beneficial for me was the ability for me to get to a place where I could understand my story without having someone tell me what it was, you know? And I think that there's definitely a fine line where there are some bits and pieces of information that the foster parent does know, but at the end of the day, how do you help empower them to understand their own story in a way that's going to allow them to be able to choose how they live that out? So.
Yeah, it's almost as if a foster parent should expect that the foster child is resilient in some way. As you mentioned, they're still here, you know, and so that in and of itself is some amount of resilience. And so understanding that situation, that story, and then going from there to develop goals or supports or opportunities from that starting point with the assumption that there is resilience there might be the approach for foster parents or someone working with foster youth.
Definitely. And I like how you say about creating those opportunities, because sometimes I think that I just think that sometimes, you know, we can limit our opportunities for our youth because we think that they're this way and they're actually not. And, you know, I think, letting them be the driver of that, but creating those opportunities. Because I know for me, growing up in care, what helped me become resilient was the opportunities that I was presented with. And if I didn't necessarily know about those opportunities, I don't know where I would be today. Right. But because someone was so selfless in being able to tell me about different opportunities to help me better myself and to help me continue to build upon my resilience, that was super key for me. And so I like how you really touch on the importance of the collaboration of having the foster parent and others providing the space for opportunities and supports, so that the child knows that there's a team. It's a team effort, that you're not alone. And I remember I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and just trying to help the person understand that it's a team effort. It's not necessarily you having to do it on your own. And I think for the longest time, this person has had to learn how to do things on their own. And so getting them past that by building trust, it doesn't always come so easy, but if you're building up those steps to create trust, oftentimes the opportunity will present itself for the youth to open up so that they can continue to make waves on resilience.
Thank you, Imani, for being here today and for those resilience insights and examples. For more resilience-focused information and resources, please visit the National Child Traumatic Stress Network website at nctsn.org, and also visit our Disaster and Community Crisis Center website at dcc.missouri.edu.